Hi, my name is Joshua Pierre, and this is my video analysis of famous couples. The couple that I chose to do is Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson from the Spider-Man franchise and Marvel Cinematic Universe. To start, as we all know, Peter Parker is Spider-Man. It's a given, and in almost every storyline and adaptation he gets with Mary Jane Watson, who is like his fixed relationship that like always transcends all of the like comics, all of the movies. Well, not all the movies. The Amazing Spider-Man was Gwen Stacy, but the first one, and then in the newer editions with like Tom Holland, Zendaya playing MJ, a different version of MJ, but still Mary Jane Watson. And basically, the relationship they have is a really interesting dynamic because Peter Parker is balancing being Peter Parker while also being Spider-Man, and MJ knows that he's Spider-Man and reveals to him, and like she reveals that to him, and they take and they go on many different relationships, like different hiatuses, different versions, and it's really interesting because we see the moral dilemma that Peter faces every time he puts on the suit, every time he goes out and fights crime and saves the city, and then we also get to see the different ways that MJ responds to him being Spider-Man. For one instance, and I don't remember which comic it is, but we see Peter and MJ talking, and MJ says, like, I love Peter Parker. I'm marrying Peter Parker. I'm not marrying Spider-Man. And it was a conversation they were having about getting married, and they were not arguing with her, going back and forth about um how their relationship and their dynamics working because, Peter Parker's Spider-Man. And that puts a strain on the relationship because he has to give up certain things that he would do with MJ. He has to give up intimacy with her. He has to give up devoting all his time to her because he has to go on and save the city, be Spider-Man. And we see MJ go through many different versions of herself while Peter kind of remains the same and he stays as Spider-Man. He just grows up differently. And for I like to over here because I have comic books lined out with references I'm going to bring up. But in one of these instances of like the moral dilemma that we see Peter Parker face is when he's constantly fighting and he gets exhausted and he starts to thoughts start creeping in being like, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, maybe I should just be a family man, put down the mask, put down the persona, and devote my whole life to MJ and to our kids that in some storylines they do end up having. And we can really see like the dilemma that Peter faces being in this relationship because of just the stress that it puts on him and everything that is going on between him and MJ. The comic I'm going to reference over here is one of the dilemmas that Peter faces is in Spider-Man Grim Hunt the Craven. He gets warped into this different dimension that's like it's a different psyche, and he's fighting who he believes Sinister Six. He's fighting Sinister Six, and then it turns out that he just killed all the different variants of himself, and so he is traumatized, understandably so. And then he still has to go home, take the mask off, and talk to MJ about it as if it was just another day at work, another day where he just went out and did something. But it takes a toll on him, and he is constantly fighting the urge to put down the mask, give up being Spider-Man, and like just be Peter Parker. And Mary Jane Watson, I'm referencing another. This is the encyclopedia for Spider-Man. Mary Jane Watson. This is like all of her information on it. I'm not gonna obviously go through this whole thing, but it talks about how MJ and Peter have always been good friends. They always got along. They always were there for each other, and then eventually the relationship started to form, and they realized that they love each other and that they really care for one another. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Shoot. And basically, and to reference back to what I was saying before with when MJ and Peter Parker are talking, she's like, I'm dating Peter Parker, I'm not dating Spider-Man. It was about marriage. Peter proposed, MJ rejected him because he devoted too much time to being Spider-Man and not enough time to her. And so it was a really big issue for them, and they didn't break up, but they like separated for a little bit because of how intense everything was and how insane Peter's life is. And even in like the encyclopedia, it talks about how MJ knew he was Spider-Man. He didn't reveal it to her. She knew it, and she brought it up to him, and that was like, whoa, how did she figure this out? And that helped their relationship blossom also, because now that she knew he was Spider-Man, he didn't feel like he had to hide parts of himself from her this whole time, which is a major like relief to him, but it's also stress inducing because now she knows this super secret about him and everything that he goes through, and that it's just a lot. But and then to reference another comic book, and this is the most recent one that was created. It's called The Ultimate Spider-Man. In this version, this is 20 number 24. I don't remember how many versions there are, but there's a flashback to Peter and MJ, and I believe what is college, where MJ takes a pregnancy test, and her and Peter are like, "Oh my God, we're about to have a kid," and you can really see. And this was in this comic book. Peter wasn't bit by the radioactive spider. There was a whole different reality warping thing going on. In this version, he wasn't bit by the spider at that time, so he was just dating MJ. They were in college together. MJ started school earlier than him, so he had 2 years left. She had a few months left, I think. And you can see in this little excerpt how important they are to one another, because MJ's like, "Yeah, I'm pregnant," and Peter's like, "All right." He's like, "I'm gonna drop out of college. We're gonna tackle this head on. We're gonna do this as a couple. We're gonna do this together." And I'm just like, "I can't ask you to do that." He's like, "You're not asking me. I'm doing it." And then as they're talking and like embracing each other, I'm just like, "Will you marry me?" And Peter's like, "That's my line." I'm just like, "You gotta keep up." Um, and so it's like, it's a really interesting dynamic that they have when you remove Spider-Man from the equation, because it just shows how devoted they are to each other and how in love they actually are with one another, that they're going through all this together. And then later on in this comic series, Peter Parker does eventually get bit by the radioactive spider many, many years later. I think he's in his 30s, 35 is when it happens. And he gets this high-tech suit from Iron Man, and he gets bit by the spider. And the first thing he does as soon as he discovers this is he runs to MJ, and he's like, "Oh my God!" He's like, "I have these powers. I have these powers. I have this costume." He's like, "I need to figure out what I'm going to do with myself now." And MJ is like his rock in this situation, where she is like, "Okay, we'll figure this out together. We'll figure this out as a couple." And they have 2 kids at the time, Richard Parker and May Parker, I believe. Excuse me. And they're discussing, like, how to approach this. And he's swinging through the city holding on to MJ. No, that's a different comic. He's talking to her, and she's like, "I know the perfect name. It's like him music." She's like, "You're Spider-Man." And in this comic, MJ is the one who gives him that name, Spider-Man. Yes, Iron Man gave him the spider by the suit and everything, but MJ is the one who really took it upon herself and upon them as a whole to be like, "Hey, you're Spider-Man. You're this hero." And it's a really, really interesting dynamic that the two of them have, because in so many comic books and so many adaptations, they break up multiple times. They get back together, they get married, they have kids, they don't get married. In The Amazing Spider-Man, for Andrew Garfield, it focused on his relationship with Gwen Stacy. Mary Jane Watson wasn't there. But in the Sam Raimi trilogy with Tobey Maguire, MJ is there from the very beginning, and you can even see in that movie how their dynamic works. Peter is smitten over MJ. He loves her to death, even when she barely acknowledges him. And he does everything in his power to be with her. And then eventually he does get with her. And then I think it's in the third movie with Venom and Sandman and all of them. You can really see, like, oh, and the second movie with Dr. Octopus. MJ is also like this key factor, this key person where, like, sometimes she gets roped into Spider-Man's world and she's used as a pawn, or she's put in danger constantly because of this. And like, that also drives a wedge in the relationship sometimes, because MJ is constantly getting kidnapped by villains and Peter has to constantly go and save her. And she's telling him, she's like, I love you. I love you as Peter Parker. I love you as Spider-Man. I love you as both. But I didn't sign up. Well, she doesn't say that she didn't sign up for this, but she's like, I can't be constantly getting kidnapped all the time. Like, that's a no-brainer. Like, that's not something that can be happening constantly. And Peter has to take that and be like, you're right, and move forward. And he has to move forward with this. And then, over time, of course, the two blossom. They have kids. They have many different relationships, different aspects. But ultimately, the dynamic between the ethical dilemmas that Peter faces as Spider-Man affects his relationship with MJ, and the two of them go back and forth quite a lot. But it's a really interesting dynamic, and I think I rambled on a little too much on certain things, but I will edit this down. But ultimately, their relationship is one of a kind, because nobody can say they're just dating and married to Spider-Man. But it's a wonderful dynamic, and it's really interesting to learn about and to read about, and it makes the comics a hell of a lot more interesting. Thank you.